This is an island surrounded by water, big water, ocean water. Trust me, I'm like a smart person. I'm very consistent. I'm a very stable genius. I had the best words. Tolerated. I know words. Mike Pounds. I hope they now go and take a look at the oranges of the investigation. But there's no better word than stupid. Anonymous, really anonymous. I'm very highly educated. One of the wettest we've ever seen from the standpoint of water. I had the best words. God bless the United States.
Around the nation, TYT Nation, Jeff Walter here with you. Welcome to the show. It's Tuesday. We got a good show for you guys today. A lot of disaster as usual. We got some oil bailouts that are coming. Oh joy! Can't wait to bail out the oil industry. Give them massive subsidies. Well, we already do, and give them even more money. You know, because that corporate socialism is fantastic. We all love this. You know that. We have Dan Patrick doubling down on, of course, wanting to kill people for his stock portfolio. That's always fun. We've got Trump's coronavirus task force. They're starting to give up. Fun times. We've got NPR doing a ridiculous take on unemployment benefits. So, yeah, if you're wondering how that's going, we've got government documents showing possibly the toll that reopening the states could have, and it's disastrous. And we got more. So lots of fun on today's show. I think my eye is twitching from all of this. So fun times. It could be the caffeine as well. So, all right. Anyway, it's bad when your eye starts to twitch. It's like, yeah, fun. We're having a good day. All right. So now, before we dive into it, we are trying to, of course, get more membership. All right. So we're trying to get membership through our Patreon. Yes, we're in some major financial trouble. It's not as if we weren't doing great before. Now we're doing worse as coronavirus, of course. So weirdly enough, views have not increased. And it's because, of course, we're being artificially suppressed by YouTube. So we're not showing up in search results anymore. Views are still cut in half. We're about 2/3 now. And even with more people sitting at home and watching YouTube videos, we're still not getting recommended. So we're having a lot of, we're having a lot of problems. It's really, really difficult now. What's going on with YouTube. So one way that we can continue to stay relevant and stay in business is, well, through our membership programs. So we're trying to get to 400 patrons, hopefully by the end of the month. We're at 374. So you can sign up to be a patron, patreon.com/TYTNation. You can help, of course, continue the viability of this channel. And so that we can not only survive, but one day actually expand and do more things. One thing that I'd actually like to do that I'm looking at starting very, very soon is a separate podcast. So just a separate podcast from this show. And it's something that, it's not just going to be me. It's going to be a more relaxed version, obviously, of me. and this show. It's something that basically I can't do on YouTube anymore that I used to. And so doing the podcast, I've already got a fun guest that I'm going to talk with. And patrons, of course, will get first dibs at listening to it. So patreon.com/TYTNation, sign up for that and help the show. Other ways you can help, of course, is to be a channel member and also use the super chats. All right. So let's move on. Let's get into the first story here. That's Dan Patrick.
What I said when I was with you that night, there are more important things than living. And that's saving this country for my children and my grandchildren, and saving this country for all of us. And I don't want to die. Nobody wants to die. But man, we got to take some risk and get back in the game and get this country back up and running.
That was Texas Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick, who was more than happy to sacrifice you for his stock portfolios. Yes. Hey, there's more important things than living, and that's my money. So go back to work and start making me money, peasant. That's essentially his entire deal. Because remember, Dan Patrick isn't going to be one who's affected by this. Dan Patrick can safely, shelter at home with his family and do video calls. There's nothing about his job that you can't do remotely. And so he's not going back into the market. So this was, of course, on Fox News, Tucker Carlson's show. And really, he's defending himself against the pushback from similar comments he, of course, made last month. And I want to show you that appearance.
And, Tucker, no one reached out to me and said, as a senior citizen, are you willing to take a chance on your survival in exchange for keeping the America that all America loves for your children and grandchildren? And if that's the exchange, I'm all in. Let's get back to work. Let's get back to living. Let's be smart about it. And those of us who are 70 plus, we'll take care of ourselves, but don't sacrifice the country. Don't do that. Don't ruin this great American
you're basically
dream.
saying,
don't sacrifice the country. And by the country, I mean, my money, because I make money off of you. I make money when my employees go to work and sell things. And so if you're not going to work, you're not making me money, and you're useless to me. So I'll be fine because, again, I can shelter in place all day, but I don't care about you. So I'm going to send you out to go back to work. And that's what they're doing in Texas, unfortunately. So as I mentioned before, Dan Patrick has little chance of getting COVID-19. He's not a frontline worker. He's not stocking grocery shelves. He's not out there. He's not a nurse. He's not a medical professional. So no, he's going to be pretty much safe. But he's telling everyone else, I don't care about your safety. Go ahead and go out and die. Because there will be people that will die. Right now, Texas has a population of 29 million people, right? And they don't just stay in Texas alone. They also can travel. And they're not the only state that's opening up. As Greg Abbott is saying that they're going to open up in phases, right? And already it's too soon for that. It is too soon for that because we don't have aggressive testing. We don't necessarily know how many people are infected but are asymptomatic since they're not testing asymptomatic people. And so there could be, thousands, hundreds of thousands of people, tens of thousands of people in Texas alone running around with coronavirus, spreading it to other people that we have not tested. And so that's the big problem here. But people like Dan Patrick, well, they're like, don't really care. Not my problem. If you die, you die. I just need to make money. Other states that are opening up, of course, you've got Florida, South Carolina, Georgia, and Kentucky. So now that's a disaster. But understand here is that this whole thing, all the calls to open up are not put forward by regular people. Now, they want you to think that. They want you to think that, oh, it's to every man, the regular worker who wants to get back to work, right? But these dastardly governments run by liberals, they don't want you to open up, even though it's perfectly safe to be able to do so. That is not true at all. No, the people, you look at who's funding those protests, right? Where they say, oh, we want to get back to work, right? Who's funding them? Those protests are billionaires. You have Charles Koch, and you have Betsy DeVos. Betsy DeVos, of course, is the education secretary under Donald Trump. And what she's doing is that her family is funding the MCC. It's a Republican conservative group that was behind a lot of these protests. And so they're doing these protests so they can manufacture consent, right? In order to have the governments justify lifting these lockdowns to send you off to die in order to make money. They don't care about human lives. And so they're wrapping this up in freedom, right? It's all about freedom. And how dare you hurt regular working people? Well, you know what? Regular working people who can't go to work are hurting. Well, you know what you could actually do? Use the power of the federal government, the Trump administration, to go and give more support to regular working people. A $1,200 check is not going to cut it. Expanded unemployment benefits, where there are a lot of people that don't actually qualify for those benefits, even though they have been expanded significantly. A lot of people still aren't able to get those. And so they're not getting a lot of help, or whatever help they are getting is not necessarily sufficient. You need to have rent, a moratorium on rents and mortgages and credit cards and things like that, just until the crisis is over. And until, of course, we can get the economy back to pre-coronavirus levels. We need to do that. But unfortunately, they're saying, no, we're not going to do that. We're not going to help you guys. Instead, we're just going to send you back out to work because generally we don't care about you. You are disposable. You are replaceable. You are cogs in the machine. And I've gone long enough. It's only been a month. An extremely long month for sure. But it's only been a month since we did this lockdown. And now already they're looking at their stock portfolios. They're looking at their bottom line. They're saying, no, I'm losing too much money. I'm super wealthy, but I'm still losing too much money. Get the peasants back to work. That's all this is. And I mean, it's the lack of humanity from a lot of these conservative governors. It just shows who they really are. And of course, when somebody shows you who they are, you ought to listen. All right. Moving on. Working with President Donald Trump is the worst, especially if you're actually trying to teach him facts, which is why members of Trump's coronavirus task force have essentially had it and have basically started ignoring him and stopped trying. Now, this is according to a report in the Daily Beast. They said the task force has tried to present a united front with the president in the early stages of the COVID-19 outbreak, but they have largely stopped correcting his misinformation on the record and even pushing back behind the scenes. Basically, they're tired of dealing with the man baby. One senior official who works with the task force says, quote, "It is a pain in the ass sometimes, for sure. There isn't much more some of us can do in that except continue making sound policy recommendations and hope they sink in. Sometimes the president backs off on some things, sometimes he doesn't. It's his call." This is coming from the adults in the room. Yes, there are still adults in the room that have to deal with this. They've got to deal with little Donnie, right? Donnie doesn't care about saving human lives. He's a sociopath. And what he does is that he goes with whatever suits his recommendations and his feelings at the moment, right? Or I'm sorry, not his recommendations, but his motivations, right? And that's what his recommendations are based off of. And so what is this? I mean, what's it all about for Donald Trump? Well, it's about winning. Of course, it's always been about winning. How's this going to impact me? What's going to happen with me? Am I going to win re-election? Am I going to make money? That's what it is. That's what it is. That's what dealing with Trump ultimately boils down to is, okay, here you have this policy recommendation, shelter in place. And Donald Trump says, well, if people shelter in place, how's that going to affect the economy, which affects my re-election chances? How are people going to spend money at Trump Resort at Mar-a-Lago? How's that going to affect me? And so that's what you have to have in mind when you work with Trump, when you give him any sort of recommendation on policy. It doesn't matter about the facts. It doesn't matter about the science. No, it only matters how does it affect the baby. I mean, that's what it's all about. That's what it's always been about. And so right now, Trump is more focused on winning in the short term. Then, of course, what will obviously happen if we go that route, which would be him losing in the long term, as well as America losing in the long term. Now, governors have noticed this, right? Especially, Democratic governors, obviously. But there's some right-wing governors as well. And so they've noticed this small but loud group of protesters that have popped up. Now, these protesters, of course, have been funded by mainly right-wing Trump donors. And those donors, of course, are people like Betsy DeVos and Charles Koch. And so these right-wing conservative groups, well, they, put up people who are economically affected by this. And I mean that by not by saying the regular workers who, yes, are economically affected. They are afraid. But then again, you have the majority of the American people, American workers, who are saying we should have these lockdown orders in place until the virus is, of course, contained, until we have those aggressive testing, and even if it harms the economy. 81% of Americans agree with what the Democratic governors generally are doing. And some Republican governors like Larry Hogan are also doing, which is being very cautious and saying we're going to stay locked down until we have this virus under control, until the medical professionals are saying that we are clear. Okay. And so Donald Trump doesn't like that. These conservative billionaires who weigh their stock portfolios more heavily than they weigh people's lives are saying, no, let's get the country back to work. I don't care how many people are sacrificed. I must make more money. And that's it. That's what it's about. And so what's interesting is that you have this dichotomy, right? And this is Donald Trump trying to have it both ways. You have Trump listening to his advisors from the coronavirus task force, right? And releasing an actually pretty good plan. It is a good 3-tiered plan on how to reopen the economy. And those 3 tiers, basically what you have to have is aggressive testing, which a lot of states don't have right now. And you have to have a significant fall off in new coronavirus cases reported in your states. You have to have flattened the curve. And so those are the criterion under this administration plan to start opening up the economy in these states. So that's a very good plan. It was released again by the Trump administration last week, and I agree with it. And it's because it's backed by science, it's backed by facts, it's backed by experts, right? So on the one hand, you have that. And on the other hand, you have Donald Trump taking to Twitter to say things like, liberate Michigan, liberate Pennsylvania, liberate Maryland, the Second Amendment in Virginia. So wait, you're going to do one hand, this ridiculous nonsense, and on the other hand, something that's smart. And again, it's because he's trying to have it both ways, because all he's doing is looking at how does Donald Trump benefit? How does Donald Trump get reelected? In fact, Ned Lamont, this is a Connecticut governor, right? He says he's Democrat. He says, quote, it's bipolar down there. We had a good constructive meeting with the vice president's commission, but then you hear the press conference of the president. You sometimes feel like the governors are being used as a campaign prop. Sometimes Dude, I got bad news for you, Ned. You are totally being used as a prop. And of course, it's Republican governors and Trump versus Democratic governors. Notice how these protests that are, astroturfed by these big donors are only popping up in states with Democratic governors. Whereas Republican governors have also done similar lockdowns, but no protests or very limited protests. Weird. Oh, that's weird how that. No, it's not weird. It's on purpose. There's a point to this, and it is all political. Oh, look at the Democrat governors. Oh, look at how they're locking people down. Look at how bad they're hurting the economy. I can't believe they would do something like that. It's all political. It's all political. And by the way, Trump does this thing where he A/B tests the audience too, right? And he basically says two different things, often in the same sentence, right? Takes two different viewpoints, and then tries to see what people want to hear, and then he'll go with that, right? And so, look, that's what he does. He makes sure to have his cake and eat it too, and have the both ways. And look, a lot of people want to get back to normal. We do, right? People want to hear that they want to get back, or that they're able to get back to normal sooner, obviously, because nobody likes being stuck in lockdown. That we can get back to work, that we can go back to taking care of our families, visiting loved ones, going back out to eat, and watching movies in the theater. We all want to go back to that, right? But we can't, because right now it's dangerous. And Democratic governors are saying right now we just don't have the testing, we don't have the supplies, we don't have the infrastructure. We've got hot spots popping up in a lot of these different places, in our cities, and so we're not ready to lift this lockdown. Whereas you have places like Texas and Florida and Georgia that are saying, nope, don't care, even though we continue to have a rise. And yes, it has slowed a little bit, but cases continue to rise where more people are getting COVID-19 and we're still having more deaths. Don't care. We're going to open it up. I mean, we're going to do it, quote unquote, responsibly, but we're going to open up gyms and bowling alleys and hairstylists. I mean, it's ridiculous, right? It is ridiculous. And of course, Brian Kemp announced his state will ease social distancing restrictions this week. Texas also this week. Florida has opened up their beaches. The beaches. And look, here's the thing. We have people that haven't been following social distancing guidelines at all. And a lot of the protests, for example, very, very small protests, usually a couple of hundred people, but those people are not practicing social distancing. A lot of them are not wearing masks. And there are some, like the ones that happened in Austin just recently over the weekend. You had people out there like Alex Jones saying, nah, you know what, this COVID-19 thing, total hoax, not real. So I'm going to go and shake hands with people. And he actually did. Well, that's how you get that's how you get the coronas, man. You want corona? That's how you get the coronas. Just ask Boris Johnson, Prime Minister of the UK. That's how he got it, because he was saying the exact same things. So look, in America, it's going to get worse before it gets better, and these Republican governors are making sure that it gets worse, that it gets worse faster, basically. So one more thing, right? So now we go to the politics of the situation, right? Trump's political advisors recognize the risk posed to his reelection if states are reopened too soon and another outbreak explodes. However, Trump thinks that he can bluff his way through all of that. Two sources told the Daily Beast that the president has recently been riffing that he has the best people and the tremendous team. I have a tremendous team. I got the best people. Nobody knows viruses like I do. He actually said that, right? And that's when he said, at about the same time, where he said, I probably should have been a doctor. I would have been a tremendous doctor. And that's what I should have done instead of going to politics. Oh my God. Oh my God. No, this guy's an idiot. He is absolutely unhinged. He does not have maybe he does have some of the at least better people. I mean, you look at Anthony Fauci, and he's actually doing a pretty good job. And there are adults, as you can see, on the coronavirus task force that are saying, we're not ready for this. We're not ready for this. But even they hit their breaking point. And they can no longer say that, hey, man, look, we're doing the best that we can. But president's not listening to us. And so I don't know what to do. I'm kind of stuck here. And why even try anymore? Why even try? So now getting back to Trump here, he says that this tremendous team of people who are no longer trying because Trump's not listening to them would be able to handle another outbreak in the fall. So already they're expecting another outbreak. They're saying, hey, man, even Trump says, well, it's probably, it's going to come back. So we haven't beaten this at all. But when we do, we're going to crush it. We're going to crush it just like we already crushed it now. What? 40,000 Americans are now dead from coronavirus. It's been a month, right? 40,000 Americans are dead now. We lead the world in infections and deaths from coronavirus now. We're not testing enough people. We should be doing about 3 times as much testing, at least 3 times as much testing, if not more. In fact, we're testing just under 200,000 people a day. Now you might think, 200,000 people a day. Wow, we're doing, that's some aggressive testing. In a country of over 330 million, not so much. In fact, Harvard researchers released a report just recently saying that in order to aggressively to have the type of aggressive testing that we need to start reopening the country as soon as possible, we should be testing not, 500,000, 600,000 people a day. No, we should be testing 20 million people a day in order to keep up with the aggressive, reopening of the country that right-wingers want us to do, that we should be doing. 20 million people a day. We're nowhere near that. So, crushing it? Yeah. Oh, he's crushing it all right. Crushing something. Coronavirus has never had a better ally than President Trump, than this moron, this idiot that's in office that knows absolutely nothing. Nothing. This thing is serious. It is incredibly contagious. It's aggressive. And the only way to beat it is to ramp up testing significantly so that we can find the people who are infected, isolate them, and, remove them from the general population, and then practice social distancing for a certain period of time, months, if not for the next year. And then watch, of course, and all that, of course, is to make sure that we don't overload our healthcare system, which we're already doing. Once we do that stuff, once we get to a point where you have no new infections, when you've actually flattened that curve, then we can start to carefully reopen the country. But in order to do that, the first step is to get aggressive testing. And we don't have that, especially in the states that they're trying to open up already. So I understand the frustration of the team. I get it, because it seems to be very clear that Trump is not interested in anything other than short-term gain, which, of course, happens to be his re-election. He's not interested in facts, not interested in doing the right thing in the long term, just the short term. And unfortunately, he's also too stupid to realize that doing the expedient thing, which is opening up the country, right, will just make this virus come back and come back hard. And that all the progress that we've made so far in slowing the rate of infections will come back, will basically be negated in a second wave. And we're going to have to start the whole thing all over again. But this is unfortunately what happens when you have a narcissistic, sociopathic moron in charge of the country. Yeah. one more story before we take the break. Here comes the oil bailouts. On Tuesday, President Trump had promised on social media that he would be giving the $181 billion oil and gas industry a federal bailout. Now, this is after, of course, oil prices, oil futures, had crashed to negative $0. Now, this is what he said on social media, and it got a lot of pushback. We will never let the great U.S. oil and gas industry down. I have instructed the Secretary of Energy and Secretary of the Treasury to formulate a plan which will make funds available so that these very important companies and jobs will be secured long into the future. Not, forgetting to add, of course, the planet will not be secured in the future because oil and gas continue to pollute the environment. But hey, climate change, we've forgotten about that whole thing because, we never really cared about it in the first place, if you remember the Trump administration. So we didn't care about that. But we do care about propping up the oil industry, which is what we've been trying to do, mainly for coal, but also the oil and gas industry, because, we care about oil profits. Those people give money to my campaign, after all. So now, as I reported yesterday, oil futures for May dropped below zero. This is the first time that's ever happened in the history of the United States, right? We've never had oil below $0. In places, there were basically producers that were paying to offload oil. So, of course, we've had an oil glut, and it makes it even worse now that we have coronavirus and no demand. So that's the problem, right? Oil and gas are struggling because there is no demand. Coronavirus has locked people down. So nobody's traveling. We're not taking planes. We're not driving around. Summer is usually the best time, of course, for, oil consumption. Because, again, a lot of people are traveling, taking vacations. Well, they're not doing that anymore. So you have no demand for oil. And so prices drop. Futures drop. And then, of course, interestingly enough, yes, we have had gas prices that have dropped, but not enough to reflect what's actually going on in the oil industry. And so there's that. Now, as I mentioned before, the oil industry is struggling now because of lack of demand. But you also have small businesses. Now, small businesses immediately ran out of their $350 billion fund passed by the CARES Act, right? So that set up billions of dollars to go to small businesses specifically. Now, not all small businesses got that money. There's stories of actually large corporations using loopholes to be able to get access to that small business money. Not actual small businesses. And so now the fund has run dry. And Congress is talking about trying to pass more additional funding for the small businesses. Now, that coming legislation obviously has a lot of problems in the fact that it doesn't actually help the workers, right? And so you've got more of a corporate bailout fund as well involved in that. And so discussions on that piece of legislation have kind of stalled out a bit. So we don't know when help for small businesses is coming. Now, you also have hospitals and doctors' offices. They're in massive need of federal funding. They're running out of money. We need them right now. We're in the middle of a pandemic, and you have hospitals that are literally laying people off right now. In a pandemic, when they need people the most, because they don't have enough funding. So Congress does need to address that. But instead, here the Trump administration is prioritizing an oil bailout. And not only that, but you also have workers that are struggling. We got our one-time, some of us got our one-time $1,200 check. I have not. I don't know when I'm going to get a bailout, but I do know that if I do, or if and when I should say I get that $1,200, that's it. That's all we're going to get. In this time of economic upheaval, that's all that workers are going to get. So we need a bailout, but instead, let's bail out the oil industry. Huge problem. Huge problem. So now a lot of people chimed in on this on Twitter. Let's start with some responses here. Christopher Zullo says, what about capitalism? Isn't that supposed to dictate investment? We need to be investing in clean renewable energy. We have a finite supply of oil, just like COVID-19 and the Republican Party cannot forward think, plan at all beyond their own interests and donors, profit over people. So look, when I broke the story about oil yesterday, I said essentially the same thing. Hey, why don't we let oil fail and start actually investing in renewable energy? Let's get rid of the oil industry. We don't need it anymore. Let's take this opportunity to actually invest in something better, right? So now other people have pointed out that we give billions to the oil industry already. Brian Tyler Cohen says, and there it is, a bailout for the oil industry, which is already subsidized by U.S. taxpayers. But sure, Trump's a populist. Well, he certainly is popular among the business community after giving them massive tax cuts and bailouts. So corporations love Donald Trump and love Republicans. Now, another user points out that Trump is going to bail out oil and gas companies while forcing states to slash services and fire countless civil servants. No, they're absolutely right. Again, we've seen hospitals laying people off. We've seen local governments that are laying people off. There are already people that are working remotely that are going to get cut, and they're going to add to the unemployment rolls. You have Megan saying, can someone please explain to me how oil and airlines get a government bailout, but somehow I'm expected to keep 6 months cash in savings? Yeah. Look, Mnuchin said that, hey, that $1,200 payment, that should last you about 10 months. Go ahead, and live on that for quite some time. We're not going to give you anything else. We might think about giving something else to you, but necessarily, we're going to focus on corporations. So yeah. Eric Reef says, will the bailout for big oil be finalized before or after everyone's May rent is due? Hey man, rent's coming up. A $1,200 check, a lot of people are spending it on rent and food. What's going to happen now? You haven't canceled rent. Mortgages are still due. People got to pay the banks. Banks are getting bailed out, by the way. Banks are getting $1 trillion a day to get floated. And are they, not restricting credit? No, of course. They're totally restricting credit. They're making sure that, they reward their biggest customers with loans, but not regular people. And so you can't get a loan out there to protect yourself, and you're not getting help from the government. So what do? It's not a whole lot you can do. And yet we're worried about, of course, bailing out the oil industry. Now, Scott Menner makes a great point about the week, right? This week actually has Earth Day in it. And now on the 50th anniversary of Earth Day, which is tomorrow, we're going to have the oil companies get bailed out. Now, Scott says they're on their knees, and it would be insanely foolish to hand them a bailout without strings attached, like public equity, and having them commit to going green in short order to, again, protect the environment. And not just protect the environment, to ensure human survival after we're done with this entire pandemic thing. Because, look, we can't go back to normal, right? This entire situation has really pointed out the flaws inherent in our society. And so why don't we take the opportunity while we can to actually make the world a better place after this. But unfortunately, the administration has shown they're not interested in making the world a better place. They're interested in making sure to help their buddies in oil and gas, who don't necessarily need a bailout at this point. Robert Reich, who was the former labor secretary under Bill Clinton, adds this: oil prices have crashed below $0 a barrel. This is not a problem. We should not try to prop up oil prices. We should not bail out companies. We should accelerate our shift to solar, wind, and other non-fossil fuels. And another user points out how, yes, we're giving bailouts to oil corporations, right? Or any other large industry, but we're ignoring the post office, who, by the way, the post office will run out of money by summer. Donald Trump's refusing to fund the post office. Who's going to do rural mail deliveries? Who's going to do the things that the post office does if we don't have a post office? You can't count on FedEx, UPS, or any of the private carriers to do that. No, because mail delivery to rural areas, which services millions of people in this country, loses money. It's not profitable. Now, the post office is able to do that and is able to make a profit because they handle mail delivery. They handle package delivery for a lot of these larger companies like Amazon. So they do that delivery and they actually make money on it. Now, the problem with the post office, as I pointed out, is that they have to pre-fund certain benefits for their employees in a way that private companies don't, which has led them to have a gigantic liability. And that's losing them money. So if we get rid of the post office and we don't bail out the post office, but we bail out oil corporations, well, I mean, what message does that send? A public good, like the post office, is less important than helping our buddies on Wall Street and helping our buddies in the oil industry, who, by the way, gave millions of dollars to Donald Trump's campaign. So that's what it is. It's legalized corruption always. And in this time where people are suffering, to see them brazenly continue on with this corruption is just beyond the pale. Absolutely beyond the pale. I think if there was a manual on the correct actions to be taken on this crisis, Donald Trump either completely ignored it or he found it and decided to use the pages as toilet paper. Because right now, our government is doing the complete opposite of everything it should be doing. And it's going to have devastating consequences for the future. All right. I'm going to take a quick break. We'll come back. I'm going to thank some patrons, see if we get to 375. Hopefully we can get to 380 patrons. That's patreon.com/TYTNation. And we'll do more stories. So stay right here around the nation. Be right back.
Mike Pence.
Welcome back to the show. Around the Nation right here, TOT Nation. Jeff Waldo here with you. All right, so I want to thank some patrons. We got 375. Thank you guys for signing up. So I want to thank Chris Landry and Mindy Storman for signing up to be a patron. It's patreon.com/TOT Nation. Channel memberships as well. I want to thank Louis Peng and Brian Mattingly for signing up. That's another way to help the show. You can become a channel member by hitting the join button below. All right, so we also have some super chats here. David Richardson said, saying, Trump didn't even know how to run a casino. Anyone believes he knows what he's doing is at least as stupid as he is. Agreed. Sarchik says the pathetic, sad orange circus clown should not be running our country. Over 44,000 dead Americans is not winning. And of course, that's going to continue to go up. Unfortunately, just look at next week. We're probably going to have spikes in Michigan, Georgia, Florida, especially. But we'll talk about that in the next segment because it's a pretty good segue on how bad it's actually going to get. Yikes. All right. A newly released cache of internal government documents presents a possible devastating loss of life if the pandemic lockdown is lifted too soon, as we're starting to see in some of the states in the South. Now, government documents obtained by the Center for Public Integrity show that officials are projecting, and this is the Trump administration, that hundreds of thousands of Americans will die if state governments across the United States lift pandemic lockdown restrictions. Now, right now, we have stay-at-home orders in a lot of different states, but you have a lot of conservative states that are looking to loosen that restriction as early as this week. Now, this is a reporter named Liz Esley White. She writes this on the Center for Public Integrity's website, quote, federal health officials estimated in early April that more than 300,000 Americans could die from COVID-19 if all social distancing measures are abandoned. And later estimates now push the possible death toll even higher. Quote, in the documents, the best guess for how things will play out without further mitigation says that coronavirus cases and deaths would double about every 5.5 days. Yikes. Now, that sounds bad enough, right? 300,000. But even she's saying, no, that's actually worse. Experts who spoke with White said that they were underestimating the death toll of lifting lockdown restrictions. Quote, the model that they're using is actually way too optimistic. This is Ashish Jha, director of the Harvard Global Health Institute. Quote, they're actually getting their analysis wrong. It's going to be worse. We are too optimistic. 300,000 Americans dying. Right now, the death toll is over 44,000 people that have died in America from COVID-19. 300,000. I mean, we went to war over 3,000 people in 9/11. There's a 9/11 happening now every single day. And how many Americans are dying from coronavirus? And yet the administration is allowing these states to say, you know what? No, I'm going to open up my state. Screw it. We got to get people back to work because I'm going to make some money. That's Governor Brian Kemp. Brian Kemp, who, by the way, did not know previously how, contagious coronavirus really was. Oh, nobody knew. Nobody knew. The experts knew. And these internal government documents show that, of course, they knew. Of course they knew. But they don't care because they're all corrupt. They're all corrupt, and they want to continue making money. They want to bolster their bottom line by getting the peasants back to work. Get back to work. I don't care if you die. I will replace you with someone else. Just make me money. All I care about is my stock portfolio. And again, that relates to Governor Dan Patrick, who, just recently on Tucker Carlson's show actually said this.
What I said when I was with you that night, there are more important things than living. And that's saving this country for my children and my grandchildren, and saving this country for all of us. And I don't want to die. Nobody wants to die. But man, we got to take some risk and get back in the game and get this country back up and running.
When he says, I got to take some risk, no. Or when he says we are going to take some risk, he doesn't mean himself. He means you. He means you. He's going to risk you so you can go back to work and you can make him money. That's what this is all about. And so these documents are disastrous, even if they're too optimistic. Now, look, conservatives are out there arguing the opposite. Oh, no, it's now we're being too harsh. The models are just they're showing too much. You shouldn't be so afraid of this. This is they're going to minimize it, right? And they're already minimizing it. I would like to err on the side of caution because look, you can't bring the dead back, right? But you can rebuild an economy, or you can properly support people while this crisis is happening, while they can't work, so that when they come out the other side, they've got money ready to spend when businesses open up. So that's, what you see now, unfortunately, is the complete opposite. No, we're not going to take care of people. We don't care about the people. We're going to send them back to work because their sacrifice is going to help my economy. Don't care. So you've got Georgia, you've got Florida, you've got other states that are making moves. Texas, where Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick is, and Governor Abbott is slowly opening up the economy already. You've got Florida that's letting people on the beaches. They're all doing this at a time where coronavirus cases are still increasing and they don't have the numbers of aggressive testing that they should, even under the president's guidelines. These are President Trump's guidelines, and the states are going, yeah, that's nice. No, we're not going to follow those guidelines because Donald Trump says liberate the states on Twitter. So he's saying two different things, talking out both sides of his mouth. And the conservative governors, they're having it their way because Trump can have it both way and say, oh, well, look at that. I put out responsible guidelines, but also liberate the states. You got to liberate the states. We cannot have the cure that is worse than the disease. Well, this disease is really, really bad. And sacrificing people for the markets, well, that's only helping the disease. That's not being the cure. Putting people's lives second to the profit margins of business owners, who are all able to, of course, safely shelter in place while their employees die. Well, they don't run this risk. They don't have to run the risk. And so it's just completely inhumane. And you've got people that have refused to social distance, wear masks, and then, call for people to openly gather in the churches and all that stuff. That's disastrous. And so now that brings us to worse projections, right? And this comes from Florida. The internal documents project that Florida is to see an additional 23,000 deaths if they rescind their social distancing restrictions. 23,000 in Florida alone. Yeah. These are disastrous numbers. These are unnecessary and avoidable. We don't need to open up right now. Yes, I know people are hurting. Yes, the government's doing a terrible job. But the government's supposed to do something about that, but they're choosing not to. And by choosing not to help, they are forcing people to go back into the workplace early, who will then get sick, spread the virus to other people, and possibly die. This isn't the nightmare scenario, by the way. It's what we're driving headlong into with the lifting of the orders so soon. Look, Donald Trump is looking at the iceberg and he's saying, what iceberg? I don't see it. I don't see an iceberg. I know everything about icebergs there is to know, and I don't see it. So let's just go and we'll drive into it, the iceberg that I don't see. It's ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous. This is what we're doing. And it's no wonder the medical community is massively against doing these actions. These governors, egged on by Donald Trump, they're going to have blood in their hands. And so is Trump. And at the very least, since we're already driving into this, and since the adults in the room are not even trying anymore, I just hope the people remember when it comes time to choose new leaders. We can remember what these governors had done, the actions they took to try to protect their people, their constituents, and the actions that they ultimately and what those actions ultimately led to. All right. One more here. And this is a story about NPR. Okay. As the markets continue to be battered by the coronavirus pandemic, one tool is being offered to workers who have been ordered to stay at home. And that tool, of course, has expanded unemployment benefits. So now, thanks to congressional Democrats, mainly Bernie Sanders, who argued and successfully got this put into a bill, the federal government will give you an extra $600 per week in unemployment benefits. Now, that is on top of your normal state benefits that you were set to receive. Not only that, but it's extended, of course, to 39 weeks. Now, the amount that you get from the state varies. And so in some states with more generous state benefits, you can actually make a decent amount of money, even more so than a living wage in some of these states with the benefits from the federal government included. So now there's over 22 million people that have filed for unemployment claims. Some have, of course, many have run into problems trying to access the system, but there are also many who are now starting to get some of these additional benefits, and it's helping them be able to weather the storm as they shelter in place. Now, there are some people, however, business owners mainly, that are not happy about people getting these additional benefits, so much so that NPR, some of them went to complain to NPR. Now, this was a coffee shop owner in Kentucky named Sky Marietta. So now she opened up a coffee shop last year, and, she was doing good. She had some customers, and then, of course, you had coronavirus. So now let's go to the NPR piece where she says, quote, I'm sorry, not she, but the NPR piece itself says this: some businesses that want to keep their doors open say it's hard to do so when employees can make more money by staying home. Quote, this is Marietta. We basically have the situation where it would be a logical choice for a lot of people to be unemployed. Well, okay, look, in normal times, that's not how this works, okay? You do want people to go out and work. You don't want people to have, unemployment benefits that are too generous. Now, one way, of course, would be to raise the pay of the average worker, so much so that people will do better when they work. I know it's a simple thing, but understand that, okay, there are some small businesses like this coffee shop, for example, that might not be able to pay out a living wage. That sucks. Maybe there should be some sort of federal subsidy that might go to specifically raising people's wages while not killing small businesses. That would be great. And look, small businesses that do, by the way, pay a living wage actually tend to do better, not only for themselves, but for the community. So really, in reality, there doesn't seem to be any good reason to not pay a living wage to your employees. And so that would be the obvious solution to this problem. However, the way that the article is framed, it makes it sound like, no, the additional government benefits, that's the real problem. The government's just being way too generous with their extra $600 a month. All right. So now Marietta says, quote, that she wanted to stay open and serve health professionals. She noted that a lot of her employees during this coronavirus outbreak were members of the medical community. She's like, well, I mean, the least I could do is serve them coffee, right? Because they're doing so much for our community. Again, this is to go to the framing that is very, very sympathetic to this person, but not sympathetic to the workers. In fact, this seems to be a very anti-worker piece, right? And so she laments that those people, those baristas, are getting more money sitting on their butts, sitting at home. And so they've decided to do that. Now, in reality, of course, you want people to sit home during a pandemic so that they don't spread the disease. They don't spread the virus. Still, she says, quote, Marietta wasn't looking for someone. This is the article. Sorry. Marietta wasn't looking for someone to cover the cost of idling her employees. She wanted them to keep working. Unfortunately, she says, the $10 to $15 an hour they'd make serving coffee is no match for the new jobless benefits. Quote, we have these lovely baristas. They're hardworking individuals, but literally this is the best possible pay of their lives they could possibly get to be unemployed. This framing, like, it frustrates me. So she says, well, I really worry about what's going to happen to those workers when those unemployment benefits come out. Hopefully we'll be open. Ridiculous. So again, I keep talking about the framing because the framing, this is NPR. This is supposed to be left-wing, right? They're not at all left-wing. They're funded by, now, unfortunately, funded by a lot of right-wingers. And so now they have this establishment, even conservative bent to them now. And so this is a great example of that conservative bent. And the conclusion that a reader is supposed to draw from this framing is, I can't believe the government would be so generous with those benefits to make people not want to work. I can't believe that. We got to put a stop to that. For people like Marietta, we got to get those people back to work for what is lower pay and, by the way, risk their lives. And again, this woman, she wants to keep open during the pandemic. She wants her employees to come back to work during this entire crisis. And again, it's probably because she wants to make money. That's what any business owner wants to do. Of course. Let's just be honest about that. To paint it as anything more than, oh, no, I want to serve my community. Sure, of course, maybe you want to serve your community, but you also want to make money doing it. That's the whole purpose of running a business. Yeah, running a business is to make money by filling a need. And so, again, it's that massive right-wing narrative. And so, look, the thing is to try to paint that narrative at a time where there is, a massively contagious virus out there, and that you have to, it's better to stay at home, right? It's better to stay at home and to have your employees stay at home and do social distancing and all that, than it is to bring people to work. Instead of pointing that out, the article quotes Republicans, right? Cites Republican concerns about these so-called unintended consequences of employees being able to have the choice to choose their health over their jobs. In fact, here's the quote in this article. Some Republican lawmakers warned about this unintended consequence of the relief bill when it was being drafted, noting that $600 a week amounts to $15 an hour, more than twice the federal minimum wage. Well, that's your problem there. Maybe the federal minimum wage should be $15 an hour. And then adds in, that's in addition to state unemployment benefits, which vary wildly, from a maximum of $235 per week in Mississippi to $795 per week in Massachusetts. Oh my God, how dare these baristas get anything more than the federal minimum wage, which, by the way, baristas don't. I think generally they're considered tipped workers, right? And in a lot of places, tipped workers get paid $2 an hour, maybe $3 at most. So I forget what the federal minimum wage for tipped workers. I think it's like $2.35. And so now these people, of course, yeah, you're going to get more money than minimum wage. Yes, you're going to take it. You're going to take it. But by the way, this article doesn't even mention the fact that you have to be laid off from your job, right? You have to be laid off from your job. You can't just go and quit a job and then say, unemployment benefits. No, that's not how that works. You have to have been financially impacted by COVID-19 and losing your job for that purpose in order to get that result in order to get unemployment benefits. So they don't even know how it works. It's absolutely ridiculous, right? And so the thought, though, is how dare we pay these people more? Because when they come back to work, they're going to start demanding more of us. Oh, man. They're going to actually say that they deserve a living wage because they got a taste of living on high in the hog, which really, $15 an hour, a living wage is not living high in the hog, by the way. And attempts to paint it as like, oh, that's so much money. That's $30,000 a year. Okay, that's the median of somebody making a supposed living wage. That is not a lot of money in this country. So understand that. And also understand that this is not a normal situation. These are not normal unemployment benefits. Work requirements have been relaxed. In a lot of places, there are work requirements where you have to search for jobs. But as friend of the show, Ben Dixon, points out, you can't send people out to find work in the middle of a plague. And he's absolutely right. The article is trash. It's pushing a gross right-wing narrative at a time where we need to incentivize people to stay home and close businesses in order to protect human life. Because it turns out you can't exactly run a business or frequent a business as a patron if you're dead. Just saying. All right. So that's what I got for you guys today. Thank you for going around the nation with me today. Please consider becoming a patron, patreon.com/TYTNation. I want to thank those who signed up. 376 patrons. Thank you. We're trying to get to 400 by the end of the month and beyond in order to, of course, allow this show to continue and grow at some point. And so thank you for signing up. Thank you for signing up to become channel members. And thank you for all the super chats as well. You guys make this show happen. Thank you. I love you guys. And we're going to see you tomorrow. We're going to have another great show here. So tune in for that, 3 p.m. Eastern, right here, TYT Nation. And remember, change begins with you. Good night, Nation. We'll see you guys tomorrow.
Please clap.
Mike Pounds.
Why? You're getting nervous, man.
Oh, wow, I'm sorry.
Tolerize it.
You're kicking me out the door. You're kicking me out the door.